Europeans never discovered anything. They looted, colonized, and took credit. The myth of European discovery is one of the most arrogant, historically illiterate lies ever told. Europeans didn't discover land, resources, or trade routes. They showed up late, stole shit, and renamed it. Then they rewrote themselves into the history books as pioneers. If someone breaks into your house, kills half your family, renames your living room, and tells everyone that they discovered it, that's what European exploration actually was. Columbus did not discover America. I hope you know that. Millions of people already lived here. He never even set foot in what is currently the United States. He landed in the Caribbean, got lost, then spent his time terrorizing, enslaving, and murdering the Taino people. The indigenous peoples of the Americas were thriving for 10,000 years before Columbus was even born. The Mayans, Aztecs, and Incas had cities, infrastructure, agriculture, as well as advanced knowledge of astronomy and engineering. The Norse, or the Vikings, reached North America 500 years before Columbus. But even they weren't discovering anything because indigenous people were already there. If Columbus had discovered the Americas, that would mean that you could walk into a McDonald's, discover it, and then own it. It isn't discovery, it's theft. Nor did Europeans discover Australia. Aboriginal Australians had been living there for 65,000 years. The oldest continuous civilization on Earth is Aboriginal Australia, with art, culture, and land management techniques dating back tens of thousands of years. When the British discovered Australia in 1770, they declared it terra nullius, meaning nobody's land, despite over 250 indigenous nations already living there. The British then slaughtered, oppressed, and displaced Aboriginal peoples for centuries, turning their homeland into a penal colony for British criminals. Europeans didn't discover trade routes to Asia. The Silk Road and Indian Ocean trade existed for thousands of years before Europeans even knew what a compass was. The Silk Road connected China, India, the Middle East, and Africa for 1,500 years before the Europeans even got involved. The Indian Ocean trading network, dominated by Arabs, Persians, Indians, and East Africans, had already been running for centuries before Spain and Portugal tried to muscle their way in. The Chinese Admiral Zheng He led massive expeditions across the Indian Ocean in the early 1400s, decades before the Portuguese even figured out how to round Africa. Europeans didn't discover Africa, which, if you believe that, what am I doing? Africa had thriving empires and global trade before Europeans even left their villages. Europeans like to pretend that Africa was a dark continent before they arrived, but that's complete bullshit. The Mali Empire between the 13th and 16th century was one of the wealthiest civilizations on Earth, with a vast trade network spanning across the Sahara. The Swahili coast had advanced maritime trade connecting India, Africa, and the Middle East centuries before the Europeans even showed up. Timbuktu was a major intellectual center, home to one of the world's oldest universities. When the Portuguese first arrived in West Africa, they didn't discover it. They had to ask permission from the African kings to set up trade ports. They didn't discover anything. They didn't civilize anything. They didn't modernize anything. They looted, colonized, and rewrote history. Cope.